All right, so this particular video deals with analytical essays. All right, so obviously, analytical essays are trying to get you to analyze something. Usually, it's something written. However, it could be a video, a movie, a piece of art, a cartoon. It could be almost anything. But it's mostly for people in the humanities. So you're talking mostly about history and English, but you could also talk about anthropology, you could talk about art, you could talk about, to a certain extent, political science. You might even be able to do it in the sciences, although I've never had to do one in bio or chem or anything like that. But it's sort of, you're meant to take a look at whatever the material is and then explain your thoughts or impressions on that piece, whatever it might be. So it could certainly be a piece of art. It's more likely going to be an article, a poem, a novel, a short story, something to that. And with that work, whatever it might be, your job in an analytical essay is to respond with a critical eye. So you're meant to be looking for things that you disagree with, you agree with, maybe things you don't approve of, things that are missing. So the steps is, first of all, read through the text or watch or look at whatever it is and take detailed notes on the important bits. Usually, if you're talking about an article, your most important things to look at are in the introduction and the conclusion. That's going to reveal the author's main point or main points to you. And that's also where your thesis statement and your revised thesis statement in the conclusion are going to be. You can also take a look, usually at the first sentences of each paragraph. Those are where the main idea sentences are going to be. So it's going to tell you a couple of things. The intro and the conclusion will tell you their main argument, and then the main idea sentences in the paragraph will explain to you what kind of proof they're using to back up what they're talking about, what kind of examples, claims, evidence, that kind of a thing. So after you've read it, and I would actually, if it's not too long, suggest reading or watching it multiple times, taking notes, because you'll notice something different each time you observe something or you read something. It's just human nature. We're not built to absorb that level of information all the time. If you think about watching your favorite movie or maybe your favorite book growing up, I'm guessing that each time you read it, different things stand out to you. I know that people in my life that are certainly much more faithful and religious than I am tell me that when they read their religious texts, especially the Bible, because I mostly grew up around, Baptists and things like that, but every time they read the Bible, they feel like they glean something new from it. That's not necessarily my experience, but I have certainly seen it happen for other people. So form your opinion after you've done the reading and taken your notes. You should have a feeling one way or the other about whatever this particular thing is. So is it too critical of its subject or not critical enough? Are there perspectives that the author has ignored? So maybe it's a white male author, who's not presenting the perspectives of women or people of color, or perhaps there's a component of, if the writer is not part of the LGBTQ plus community, maybe they're not taking that into account. And then do they misinterpret some of the evidence, or do they use it properly? There are a lot of ways to interpret data. And, sometimes they, in order to make their argument look better, they may leave out certain things that don't line up with what they are trying to argue. So, for example, if any of you have ever taken statistics or algebra or anything like that, an outlier, something that doesn't fit neatly in with your plotted points, your data set. So maybe they ignore an outlier when you think that it should be included. So then you're going to organize your argument around your objections. You can absolutely agree with the author, but it's much easier to write if you can find something that you disagree with. It's just easier to write that way. I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe because when you are explaining that you agree with something, you're simply regurgitating what the author already said, so it doesn't come off as impactful. But I would suggest trying to find something that you disagree with. So figure out what it is that your objections are based on forming your own opinion around those ideas. Then you want to make sure that in your thesis statement that should be present at the end of your introduction and then refocused and restated in the conclusion, tell straight up whether you agree or disagree with it and why. That should be your thesis sentence. And again, avoid the first person in this. I know that it's tempting in the same manner that doing it in the persuasive essay would be tempting, but again, unless you're writing a reflective essay, and you can go and look at the video for that one, it's really unusual to refer to yourself in the first person when you're writing a paper. It's just not done in academics because it comes across as not mature, for lack of a better term. And I don't mean that to be insulting, it's just not seen as part of college writing. And then I suppose I should have waited to say avoid first person, but similar to the persuasive essay, use key elements as claims. So these objections that you have, they're going to become your evidence in your body paragraphs, and you can see that right here. So you should, in your introduction, express your opinion, should have 3 sections where you present evidence or claims, then restate your opinion while tying together your references to the claims that you've made. And then when you take a look at examples, I'm guessing most of you haven't read this. If you have, then absolutely congratulations. You're one of the few. But so there's a book called Walden that was written by a naturalist and many, many other things, Henry David Thoreau, back in the, when was the Mexican-American War? It was in the 50s maybe, or maybe a little bit later than that. I'm blanking on the date. But so Walden is largely about one man moving outside of a town in New England to build himself a cabin and just live in solitude, kind of like a hermit or a monk or something like that, for a year or more. He just wants to go out and live in nature and see what effect it sort of has on him. And there are many beautiful parts of it, if a little bit drawn out and kind of out of touch with the modern world. But the one part of it that always irks me is that he discusses an immigrant family that he comes across that lives not too far away from him that are Irish, and he is just incredibly insulting towards the Irish immigrants. I mean, if you can imagine sort of this dirty, destitute family, he really plays it up, and it really does not. I can't imagine that it was great to read back when he wrote it, but it certainly doesn't age well. It looks really out of place and is really insulting and weird. Another thing that you might be asked to take a look at in maybe a political science class or something like that, is they may ask you to watch the State of the Union that happens every year in February when the president addresses Congress, and fact check it, or explain what you thought was successful about the speech and what you thought was strange or maybe didn't make sense. And then finally, another example would be, there's this poem of Shakespeare. If you ever see the abbreviation SHX period, that means Shakespeare, just in case anybody was wondering or could see that. But he has several poems that follow the tradition of romantic poems where, say, for example, not roses are red, violets are blue, but some of those poems that overemphasize the natural beauty and they're very over the top kind of love poems. And Shakespeare, in a couple of cases, writes these poems that are in that style, but are actually kind of unflattering. And so, one popular exercise is to ask students, like, is this really a love poem? Because he's kind of giving these backhanded compliments, like, there would be, like, somebody might say, like, that their love's eyes shine like crystal or diamonds or something like that. And I think one of the lines in his poem is, my love's eyes are nothing like the sun, or something like that. So he's kind of picking on the people that are writing in that style. So is it a love poem? Is it not a love poem? And then you would give your evidence for whichever way you felt. So those are a few examples. Analytical essays are not radically different than persuasive essays, but rather than you forming your own opinion and going out and finding your own evidence, largely analytical essays are going to ask everyone to look at the same thing and then use its own content to decide whether you agree or disagree with the message of the piece. So, just keep in mind, read through the text, take notes, form your opinion on what is there, what's missing, if evidence is not used correctly. Organize your argument around your objections or what you find positive about it. Use your thesis statement to state your flat opinion, whether you agree, disagree, why. Use key elements of the person's own work in your claims and avoid the first person. All right, everybody. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.